Hello, Raptors Nation. Sean Davis here for the Raptors Nation, your home for everything Raptors. The Raptors fired Nick Nurse. Since the last time we've recorded, we've both been crazy busy, so unfortunately I haven't been able to talk about it. But I think the way we ended the last pod, we played a game, 3 words or less,
Yeah.
Nick Nurse. And my 3 words or less was one more run. And the Raptors just decided to say, you know what? Nah. They clearly paid attention to the show, and that's why he got fired. So screw me. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, joined by my friend Luca Rosano. Luca, how are you doing? And what a crazy time to be a Raptors fan.
Yeah, I mean, the news broke out of nowhere. It was Friday.
Very
We're,
random.
we're literally working on almost 1 week of his firing. It was Friday. You're looking forward to some NBA playoff action. And then, yeah, the Nick Nurse firing news dropped. And my 3 words were, I'm not sure. I didn't know what was going to happen with Nick Nurse. I gave the situation the benefit of the doubt, leaning towards Sean's standpoint of Nick Nurse being back for that final year, honoring the final year of his contract. So when the news dropped, yeah, it took me by surprise. Initially, I mean, I didn't expect it. I thought the Raptors were going to make it work with Nick. I thought Nick would be back, and that is not the case. And it was a crazy story after, because you had basically 2 very distinct reactions. You had one side that was not surprised by it, and they were actually happy that Nick Nurse was removed as the Raptors head coach. But then the other side was that you had people who were shocked / even mad that the Raptors fired Nick Nurse, because I know Sean has said this so many times on the show, and I do believe it still, that Nick Nurse is arguably a top 5 coach in the NBA right now. So put it this way, long story short, I was surprised, but I wasn't necessarily upset, because after what Masai Ujiri said, it seemed like it was one of those things where Nick Nurse and the Raptors organization mutually decided it was best for this to happen. Obviously, it wasn't a mutual thing. He got fired, but I think they did a lot of talking beforehand. So I think both sides were okay with what was going on, and it didn't catch one or the other by surprise. However, what transpired afterwards made me now a little upset. And that's the fact that the guy who was supposed to be the Raptors' next head coach, heavily rumored, it was written by Woj that he was going to be the Raptors' next guy, Udoka, goes to the Rockets. So now you have a situation of who the hell is going to be the Raptors' next head coach? Because I think we can both agree, Sean, when you get rid of a guy like Nick Nurse, who is arguably a top 5 coach in the NBA, you sure as hell better replace him with a guy who can, who's on the rise and who can maybe get there. And a guy like Udoka, who is a name, who is a guy who is coming off an NBA Finals appearance. He has proven that he can have success with a generally young team. But now it's like the Raptors are going to go in-house and go after like a guy like Adrian Griffin. I mean, in hindsight, was it worth it? This to me, and I know I'm going on a rant here, but this to me,
No, keep going.
maybe suggests that the Raptors, I think, might be going towards a whole like rebuild phase, because you don't bring back Nick Nurse, who obviously is like a championship now coach. You don't bring in Udoka, who obviously is going to want to compete at the highest level. If you elect to go for a guy in house, that to me tells me that maybe the Raptors are now willing to play the long game and just bring in a guy who is going to be okay with kind of restructuring this thing.
Yeah. Look, yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that. The way you brought it up there at the end, Luke, about how maybe the Raptors thinking about going in house is a way to be able to say, "Hey, look, we're going to give you that coaching job, but we're going to do things this way. We're gonna give you the job, but we have to kind of play things the long game wise." That did not come out right, but look, Nick Nurse had some troubles this year, right? But Nick Nurse, and this is kind of what Luke also just said. I kind of been saying this for a little while. Look, if you're going to replace Nick Nurse, I had no problem with it per se. Like I was I was shocked, surprised. The timing was, I personally thought, was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But again, like upset. No, was it justifiable? Sure. And it felt like we were kind of, if we're being honest, with the benefit of hindsight, I felt like we were leading to this point, right? We were getting to this point throughout the season, and then the way it ended and things of that nature, it just all kind of built up. But yeah, Udoka not wanting to come to Toronto, reportedly basically choosing Houston over Toronto. Um, it's very very weird, I suppose. But I mean, look at Houston. Not to count somebody else's money or whatever, but like Houston, they got a good situation. If we're being completely honest, I know they were god awful this year, but like if I'm a incoming head coach, bro, I got cap space. I got potentially, for sure, probably a top 3 pick, but potentially the number 1 overall selection, plus cap space, plus Jalen Green, plus Alfred Sengun, who I'm huge on, plus Jabari Smith Jr., plus they got some other decent pieces. Tari Eason, who just got drafted, who I'm really like. They got some pieces down there in Houston. I'm not saying the Raptors don't have pieces, but in terms of better situation, am I wrong, Luca? Am
You
I
can.
thinking of
I
that
was gonna say
Houston's a
you can say it, Sean. Say it with your full chest. The Houston Rockets have a current better situation than the Raptors. I agree with that. They do. You just said it. They got young talent who can still bloom and become like, Jalen Green can still become a number 1 guy for all we know. He's showing a lot of good
yeah,
things. You got some really good pieces, and you're going to have, and the reason why I say they have a better situation currently than the Raptors is because you're going to have, like you said, at worst, a top 3 pick in a generational draft, and at best, Victor Wembanyama. That's
so
friggin'
look,
good.
so look, it's either Victor Wembanyama or Brandon Miller, which is like shrug. I would love to have Victor if I'm a Rockets fan, but like,
Yeah.
bro, if you're telling me I get the 3rd overall pick, okay, cool. I'm not as upset. Got Brandon Miller. It's not like last year where who went through, like, okay, this is kind of ironic. No diss to Jabari Smith Jr., but it's going from having the 1st pick in Paulo and having the 3rd pick in Jabari Smith Jr., like, or like the
Yeah.
5th pick in Keegan Murray. Like, I love those guys. I'm really high on Keegan, actually. But
Yeah.
like,
Keegan's
bro,
good.
it's Paulo and then it was everybody else. And or maybe Chet, throw Chet in there. But like this year, it's Victor, but the what am I thinking of here? The like comp picks or whatever. Like here you go. Like here you didn't get the 2nd place prizes or whatever are a lot more shinier, I suppose, this year than last year.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah, like
you're talking about bringing in one of those guys, like you said, with Jalen Green and like an Alfred Sengun. Like, that's a really good situation.
you're telling me that if I'm Houston, and let's stop talking about Houston after this, but like Houston, like let's say even I don't get Victor, right? Okay, I still have Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr. I can go draft a Brandon Miller and then Alfred Sengun plus cap space. Come on, bro. But
Yeah.
that's
There
enough
you go.
Houston
That's your
Rockets
answer.
talk. Yeah, so that is the better spot for MA. I personally, in terms of like the hire, I love the hire. I thought as a basketball coach, I feel like a lot of people got really upset at the Houston Rockets organization, and deservedly so. I'm not gonna disagree with any of that discourse. But when I personally talk about coaching hires, I talk about it from a basketball standpoint, from a Udoka as the top 10 head coach. So
Yeah.
good hire for the Rockets and the Raptors. Now, turn this back to you, Luca. Where do the Raptors go from here?
Yeah, just really quick, and that's like the main reason why after this whole week has gone down, that I'm a little upset now because I was okay with and I came to grips with the Raptors firing Nick Nurse if it meant my team getting Ime
If they
Udoka,
Udoka.
like
Yep.
we said in previous pods. I'm not talking about stuff he's done off the court, but when he has taken the reins as a head coach on the court, his record speaks for itself. So I was okay with it. I accepted it, knowing, okay, hey, Nick Nurse is gone, but pretty good consolation prize in Udoka. But now that Udoka is in there, I'm a little, I guess upset would be like an overreaction, but I'm a little worried of like who the Raptors are going to get next because, we could talk about it right now. I don't think there's a necessarily deep coaching pool out there. I mean, there's some intriguing names, but I think
Dwayne
ultimately,
Casey.
I was just about to get to that. I think ultimately it comes down to a
Wait,
couple of options. They're either going to go with somebody in house, like an Adrian Griffin, who right now, if you guys, bet, I think he's the betting favorite to get the Raptors head coaching job, and he is going to get an interview. It's been announced. Do I dare say, well, Sean already said it, Dwayne Casey, you bring him back. And remember, he was the guy that got the Raptors good before Nick Nurse took over. And he was the guy that was in there with the likes of Siakam and Van Vliet and really grew with those guys and was a part of bench mob and all those days with Kyle Lowry and DeRozan at the forefront as Siakam and Van Vliet were coming up. Another name that was intriguing to me, Sean, that I saw, I think he was the third. He had the third best odds. Atkinson of the Warriors. That is a name that really stood out to me. I would be okay with that. And then another name that this is. It actually made me chuckle because I think you brought him up on a previous pod. Frank Vogel. Could he be the Raptors' next head coach? I mean, there's a possibility there as well. But if I had to put my money on somebody, I think it will be Adrian Griffin. And like I alluded to earlier, Sean, I think with the Raptors firing Nick Nurse and now they missed out on Udoka, by the way, I don't know how Masai Ujiri and company are feeling. They're probably pissed off that they missed out on him because I guarantee you that's who they really wanted. They're probably going to take this thing one step back, get a guy like Griffin who's familiar with the current team. And then maybe, yeah, they decide to take a step back and they tell him, look, we're bringing you in. We're going to make some significant changes. We're playing the long-term game. And Griffin seems like a guy who would be patient in that role and would be accepting of the role because he just wants to land his first coaching gig. He wants that experience. So he would be okay with that situation. Whereas another marquee name coming in a Frank Vogel or an Atkinson, I'm not necessarily sure they would want to take a rebuilding team. But that's if the Raptors do take the rebuilding route. I think what I'm trying to say here is whoever the Raptors name as their next head coach is going to tell us about what direction they might ultimately choose. Is it fair to say that?
I think so. I'm looking. I'm looking. I am phone. I get. I'm looking because there's coaches I want our head coaching candidates that I want to toss out. But I do agree. If you keep in house, I really think this is the thing. If you stay in house, I think they're going to rebuild. If you stretch out, I think that it opens up. I could see the Raptors, they bring in a Kenny Atkinson. I think they could rebuild. Kenny did a really good job. He's about to take the Charlotte Hornets job. And then he decided, hey, I'm going to go compete for another championship. But I think Kenny could take the job. He's done a good job of developing. But yeah, Kenny Atkinson, he was about to take the Charlotte Hornets job. Now he decided to stay Golden State, compete for titles. But I think Frank maybe could take the job. Who knows? But a name that I would keep an eye on is someone that I actually had in my top 5 poll for the Lakers head coaches last year after we fired Frank. And that's a name named Kevin Young. He's one of the top assistants in Phoenix, interviewed for a bunch of jobs. He does a ton of great work with Monty. I think he's actually in charge of the offense. I forget where I saw that, but he basically he plays a very integral role to making sure that Phoenix Suns team is how good they've been and as good as they are, for the past 2 seasons. He's done a great job. So if I'm a Raptors fan, as a Raptors analyst, I'd go if you're going in-house, then Adrian Griffin, obviously. But I go Kevin Young, then Kenny Atkinson's up there. I'd throw an interview at Frank Vogel, kind of to do my due diligence, if I'm being completely honest with you. I throw Frank an interview, and then Budenholzer assistants keep getting jobs. So let's go interview Charles Lee while we're at it.
I was gonna say, what about Budenholzer if he somehow gets canned by the Bucks? I mean, if the Bucks lose in the first round, I could see them parting ways.
You think so?
I mean, that would be an epic failure. I would be I'm not saying I think I would put out 60% he gets fired if the Bucks lose in the first round, and especially if they lose in 5.
Okay, here would be my my comeback to that. Do you bulk it up as for the Bucks? Giannis was hurt. I think Budenholzer can blame that. and then the Bucks organization says, okay, cool, we'll keep you for another year, but we're
Yeah.
gonna restructure this roster and we're gonna rebuild it, not rebuild it, but kind of
Retool.
retool it for Giannis because obviously you still want to compete. But yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Maybe they give him another year. I see it. Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah. But I don't know. Very, very interesting. But Luca, do you have a favorite, a preference right now, or more than that? What do you want to see in the next Raptors head coach?
Well, before I get into that, I can tell you who I don't want to see as the Raptors head coach. And for some reason, it has been getting some attention. It has been getting some spotlight, probably because he's
Who's that?
Canadian. That's if you haven't figured it out yet. I'm talking about Steve Nash. He has been mentioned, and I do not
He
want to see
has.
Steve. Yes, he has, just because of the whole Canadian, like he's Canadian and the ties with that. But I do not want to see Steve Nash as the Raptors head coach in any pipe dream. Whether you're okay with the whole or whether you love the whole Canadian storyline, yeah, it's cute, but yeah, keep Steve Nash away from this team. Um, yeah, I'm more interested about the direction. Like at this point, who I want to see in a coach. I want to see a coach that is gonna come in and really have a good connection with the players. And which is why like a guy like Dwayne Casey does actually make a lot of sense. It'd be crazy if he comes back given the circumstances in which he left. He got fired. But
After
you know,
winning Coach of the Year, which I
after
thought
winning
was
coach of the
always
year,
hilarious.
but it seemed like the players at least respected Casey. And yeah, the Raptors weren't at the top. And yeah, they were, one and done and LeBron and all that. They didn't have much success in the postseason. But, at least they played hard. And, you had a good camaraderie amongst the players and the bench. So I think first and foremost, the Raptors need to get like a coach that is going to have a good connection with the players. But yeah, if I had to guess who I think it's going to be, given the Raptors' track record as well, think about it. Their last couple of coaches have been in-house. Nick Nurse was in-house. I think they will go in-house. And another name I want to throw out here, who is in-house, is Patrick Mutombo, who was the Raptors 905 head coach before he joined the Suns as an assistant. So, is he still the assistant for the Suns? Actually,
Not
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, well, it says currently, but I know he did coach for the 905. So yeah, that is a guy that has had obviously familiarity with the Raptors organization. And then Griffin makes the most sense only because when Nick Nurse obviously served some suspensions and even going back to the bubble, and even last season he had a couple games where he coached this team, and they don't look terrible, and you can tell these players had a good relationship, and they were obviously well equipped with Griffin and his philosophies and all that. So personally though, I would like to see the Raptors just bring in a guy who does have a proven track record. I think it would be a letdown as much as I see it happening of it being either Mutombo or Griffin. That's my prediction. Now, would I be like sold on that? Not necessarily, because it would be more exciting. Put it this way, it'd be more exciting as a Raptors fan to bring in a guy that is not in house, because at least it creates a whole mystique of like, okay, we're getting somebody. Can this be the guy that unlocks something new with this Raptors team? And one of the biggest, one of the most exciting pieces of me wanting Udoka was that I thought he was going to bring the best out of a guy like Scotty Barnes, right? So if I want to see the Raptors bring in somebody that's just going to spark some excitement. A guy like Atkinson, I think would be really good. Some of the names that you mentioned as well. But when you go in-house, yeah, I think that tells me that the Raptors are going to be ready to rebuild, which won't be the end of the world. But I think it would be a big letdown considering that like you go from Udoka to like now all of a sudden you're going in-house. So yeah, I'm not too sure what to expect at this point, because I was like 95% sure that it was going to be Udoka after the Raptors fire Nick Nurse. And now, I mean, I'll throw this back to you, Sean. Do you think there will be any do you think there's any regret now amongst the Raptors, and especially Masai Ujiri and this organization, that you fire Nick Nurse, who is a top coach in this league, you whiff on Udoka, and now maybe they're scrambling to find their next head coach?
I made a long time. This is my problem with firing head coaches, especially really, really good ones, right? And it's really interesting the situation that Boston landed themselves in, and I'm trust me, this connects. Brad Stevens, his last year in Boston was the year after the bubble. Very, very like it. By the way, if you look at any team, like all the teams that were in the conference finals in the bubble that had a very short off season, the Celtics, Heat, Nuggets, Lakers, all of them. I think the highest seed was the Nuggets that year. They were the 6th seed. Actually, no, the Nuggets and the Heat were both 6 seeds that year. Nobody made it past the second round, and the Nuggets got to the second round and got swept, if I recall. So, I mean, there's some other reasons for that, but that year was a really tough year for Boston. And I still thought coming out of the year, Brad Stevens probably a top 10 head coach. Brad Stevens steps down. He goes into a front office role. I was like, oh no, what does Boston do from here? Right? Because look, my thing with top 10 head coaches is kind of what you said at the start, and it kind of what I've been saying in the past. Bro, you top 10 head coaches don't grow on trees. They just don't. Right? So if it's just hard to replace them. Boston, lucky for them, they were able to. Brad Stevens steps down. They bring in a new one, Emi Udoka. They struggled to start 16-16 start. By the end of the season, they made it to the NBA Finals, 2 games away from being a champion. And they're not. And this is more so personally. Emi Udoka isn't a top 10 head coach in my eyes because of the fact that they made the finals personally, right? Like for me, he's a top 10 head coach because of the buy-in he got from the players, the fact that Jaylen Brown had his best year in his NBA career that year up to that point, and how good defensively they were, how they would run out different schemes defensively. It was always really, really fun to watch how he got the best of the guys like a Robert Williams, out of a Derek White at the trade deadline, out of a Marcus Smart, won Defensive Player of the Year that year. Kind of a joke, but still. And then even offensively, stuff they were running offensively from a scheme standpoint. And ironically enough, the stuff with Udoka happened, but they had 2 other dudes on that staff who I'm a big fan of, Joe Mazzulla and Will Hardy. My point in bringing all that up is Boston is like a massive outlier, right? In the past 5 years, they've had like 5 top 15 head coaches in their organization. Brad Stevens, Emi Udoka, Joe Mazzulla, who's still good, and then Will Hardy. Will Hardy's top 15. He's really good.
No, he's really
right?
good.
So the Raptors, they got unless you're super sold on Adrian Griffin,
Which I'm not.
Which I'm not exactly. Like that awkward pause there tells you how we feel. I don't fire Nick. Like Emi Udoka needs to be as close to. Where's the pen? I wish I had a pen near me. He needs to be as close to pen literally signed to paper for me to fire Nick Nurse.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just gonna wait this year out, play the year out. I'm not gonna buy out his contract, and Udoka is not at my doorstep waiting to do a student exchange. Dang here, like so you wasted money because you're still gonna have to pay him for the last year, even though you fired him. You don't get Udoka, and what you're gonna do all of that to get Nick Nurse's top assistant? That's why I typically, especially in a firing, I don't like going in house unless you absolutely have to. I don't like it because you're just obviously like there's some ideologies that are different, but like, bro, I got rid of this guy and I'm gonna want to keep one of his top assistants to be my head coach. Very, very rarely. And even the Boston situation is a lot different because Brad stepped down and then Udoka, if that situation doesn't happen, he's still the head coach right now. So
Brad Stevens,
right. Or Udoka's still that coach if he doesn't have that situation.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah,
right.
There was no firing with the thing is, there was no firing with the Celtics situation. No, it was just Brad got promoted or he stepped up, and Udoka had that whole off the court issue. Yeah, and that's a really good point.
Yeah, so like I personally, and I guess that's my argument for don't go in house. Top of my list would be Kenny Atkinson, a guy that's seen winning. He's just won an NBA championship. has the opportunity and is competing currently to win another one back to back. You're not really a superstar team, and that was kind of the concern with Kenny because of stuff that came out from Brooklyn about Katie and Kyrie and how they didn't really like Kenny Atkinson all that much. But with Kenny, when he has a team that's young, hungry, and it seems like he has the respect of those guys in Golden State, like a Steph and a Clay. But when he has a team that's young, that's fiery, that doesn't really know how to win yet, I think Kenny could do really, really well with that. Hence that Brooklyn team that where he got the best of. That is the best D'Angelo Russell we've ever seen, and we have yet to see it since.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my point there, and I'm gonna land my plane on that one. Don't go in house. You fired Nick for a reason, and that's
Yeah.
where I'm gonna end at.
Yeah, no, I agree with that take wholeheartedly. It's true. And I mean, that was one of the reasons why now I'm a little bit like iffy about, do the Raptors know what they're doing? Because I really, really think Masai Ujiri firing Nick Nurse had his guy ready to go in Udoka. And then I don't know what happened. Udoka threw a curveball, wanted to go to the Houston Rockets instead of the Raptors, probably looked at that situation. Well, no, he's not probably. He did look at the Rockets situation as being a more ideal spot for him, and rightfully so. So now it's like, are the Raptors going to regret firing Nick Nurse? And are they going to be stuck with having no other choice but to go in-house? But like I said, I mean, or like you said, sorry, I should say, yeah, when you fire a guy like Nick Nurse, who isn't a coach that grows on trees, you better have a damn good replacement up next, or else there's going to be a lot of people wondering what the hell is going on. Because right now, yeah, I feel very, very confused of what's going to happen now. That's why, like, when the Udoka news dropped, I was literally at the gym. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, not only did Woj say that it was highly expected, a lot of people were talking about it. There was a podcast on ESPN with Windhorst, and I can't remember the two other guys who were on it, but they were basically, they basically said without saying the name, oh, Toronto's got their guy. And then I remember I quote tweeted it and said, it's
Yeah,
Udoka. It's got to be. And then all of a sudden, the Rockets hire him. I'm like, oh, damn, where the hell does this leave the Raptors now? So, yeah, I definitely see that standpoint. Knowing the Raptors,
they're probably gonna go in house.
they keep taking L. Sean. I think they shot themselves in the foot. Udoka screwed them. They're probably going to go in-house. That's my prediction.
I'm gonna end on this, and this could be a good way to end the pod. There was a report, and and we talked about this briefly on the show. You mentioned you brought it to my attention before we went on that the Udoka basically not rejected, but he chose Houston over Toronto, right? That is like malpractice from a GM standpoint, in my opinion. Like, kind of like we just said, like, bro, you gotta know if Udoka is out and say, nah, I'm not feeling it. I'm like, you gotta be as close to offering Udoka the job without saying
Yeah.
it. Like, it's gotta be a, hey man, what would you think about coming over and maybe helping us out, wink, in Toronto, or
Yeah.
would you rather us, or like, dude, it's gotta come as close as possible to offer him the job without saying it. And if he's like, you gauge his interest level, or like, if you think you have a shot, okay, all right, where do we go from here? Okay, cool. Hey, you know what? If you want the job, we'll fire Nick. I mean, maybe like not that extreme, but like, dude, you can't. I don't know how you botched the situation, man. Like, it should have been a Udoka wants the job, cool. We'll fire Nick Nurse. If Udoka doesn't want the job, we'll
Yeah.
keep Nick Nurse. We'll ride this last year out, and then we'll clean house from a coaching staff standpoint. Get all of his guys out of there, players. I mean, you're gonna clean a lot of those guys up this year, anyways. Like, buy Fred, probably buy Gary,
Yeah.
buy Pascal? Question mark. So, I don't know. Massive botch of a situation, a bigger botch than the Matt Hardy all out 2021 botch. Was that all out? Yeah, it was all out,
I
right?
think so. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. I think honestly, my gut prediction is, yeah, they're going to go in-house. The Raptors are going to rebuild because, like, there's been reports too saying that expect some big changes. I don't see the Raptors landing a superstar. I know Frank Isola mentioned Dame, but that was just him like spewing out teams' names. I think the Raptors are going to go back to like their early 2010 days where you got a bad record, got a young team, and you're trying to just rebuild this thing, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, because I mean, like, a lot of the pods this season, we're calling for that, of getting assets and trying to, like, make it work around Scotty and OG. But I have a feeling the Raptors are going to take a step back after this offseason, given it like the whole coaching perspective and just maybe some of the changes that they're going to make. Like you said, they lose Fred, they lose Gary. Maybe they trade one of their players like an OG or Siakam for a big haul. I think they'll have no choice but to do that, because really, like, what else are you going to do? You're not going to run it back and just hope a coach is going to save the situation, because Nick Nurse would have saved the situation. And I highly doubt you're going to trade for a superstar, because in order for you to get a superstar, you're going to have to give up young assets. You're going to have to give up future picks. And the Raptors have already done enough damage in unnecessarily giving away picks. Cough, cough, next year's, which is not, it's top 6 protected, but if it's 7, 8, 9, or 10, it's going to San Antonio. So they're stuck in the middle. I think the Raptors do have to blow this thing up. They got to rebuild. Go after an in-house coach who's going to be okay with losing for a couple more seasons. But yeah, my gut feeling is that's what's going to happen. And the Raptors are going to return to their, the dark days, if you will, of just kind of going through the motions and trying to build this thing back up the right way.
Well, Raptors Nation, one thing that isn't going anywhere is us. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and that like on this video. Leave a comment down below. As always, subscribe right here to the Raptors Nation YouTube channel. Ring that post notification bell for more. Sean Davis here, Luca Rosano. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time. Peace out.